It's Wednesday morning after the strike has been lifted. Good news for some. Others are just waiting to see how things eventually turn out. Organized labor has given the government 1 week for more negotiations to happen, else the strike will continue. We'll be talking about the strike, the lifting of the strike, and all the other intricacies. I am Olive Emodi.
And I am Osaogi Ogbawan. Just like Oliver said, things are starting to ease up bit by bit across the country. Of course, electricity has been restored to many parts of Nigeria. We, of course, are expecting that the petrol queues also disappear in the next 24 hours, maybe 48 hours max, as things return to normal. Organized labor, of course, is still having these discussions with the Nigerian government. The strike has been suspended for 5 days. Will they be returning to the strike? Will the organized labor be accepting above 60,000 naira, just like the federal government has said? These are some of the things that we're going to be looking at this morning. And of course, what must be done to prevent another strike by organized labor? Bola Tinubu is also joining us with breakfast headlines. Good morning, Bola. Bola, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Good morning, Olive.
Good morning.
Good morning, Osaoge. Feels good to be here the morning after the strike. I mean, my experience yesterday going to get fuel at the filling station was a very bad one. We had a long queue. I was on the queue, and then all of a sudden, touts just took over the control of the filling station, and they were in charge of the ones selling, fuel. They were selling for themselves, filling up, jerry cans of about 50 liters. It was crazy. At a point in time, they had to suspend selling fuels to any one of us.
Yeah.
But hey, well, we're glad, Labour, TUC, and the NLC have agreed to relax the strike, like they say. They say it's not a suspension, but they are relaxing the strike. And then they will be in discussion with the government. And then it's good to know that the government has elected the Minister of Finance, and that's Wale Edun, to bring up a template for them to negotiate with organized labor, hoping something fruitful, comes out of that.
Well, we hope something fruitful comes out of that. I think the exciting part first is that the power has been restored. It was a bit of an inconvenience. But then again, with strikes, it's expected that there will be some measure of inconvenience, and the point needs to be driven home. We also want to see what the details are of what is being offered, because the government has agreed to pay, more than 60,000 naira.
Yeah.
Above 60,000 naira. I was watching an interview with the trade union leader where he was being asked, above 60,000 can mean 60,500 or 61,000. He said, no, that they were sure to, to explain or to clearly have the government affirm that they would pay something substantial in addition to the 60,000.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's for the best interest of Nigerians and Nigerian workers that the federal government and organized labor come to a middle ground of some sort.
Yeah. I also, kept wondering yesterday if members of the organized labor, if there's certain, or maybe a couple of them that may have been disappointed with their leadership, after going into that meeting with the federal government and then having that agreement that simply said above 60,000 naira, and of course, completely ignored the conversation on the electricity tariff hike also. Do organized labor members maybe also feel the same disappointment, same way Nigerians feel? Because most of them were on the road yesterday. They were picketing offices here and there. They were, dancing on the streets, and then, doing the whole, we no go agree. And the next thing you know, the strike has been suspended. But, like you've said, what happens, next? Is it 60,500 naira? Is it 70,000 naira? Is it 80,000 naira? And of course, Wale Edun being told by the president to draw up a template, a financial template and all of that. For me, and it's just worrisome, that the Nigerian government didn't think all this while, since they got into office, about how, stressful and how, difficult things have been for Nigerians. They needed a strike to happen first. They needed a protest to happen first before they realized that they maybe needed to make some adjustments with the minimum wage. It's terrible. Does this mean that if there wasn't a protest, that Nigerians would have continued to, being forced to endure 30,000 naira minimum wage, regardless of what the economy turns into by the policies of the current administration, while of course they continue to, allocate, hundreds of billions of naira every year to the National Assembly and to and of course many frivolous projects, by the government? It's painful.
Indeed, also, it's very worrisome that we have to get to this point before the government can, direct Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, to drop a template for negotiation with organized labor. But then, On the bright side, let's see what comes out of discussions with government and then organized labor. Fingers crossed, we'll see how that conversation pans out. Hello and welcome to Breakfast Headlines here on News Central TV. I am Bola Tinubu. Let's begin by telling you that few hours after organized labor in Nigeria suspended a 2-day strike, President Bola Tinubu has directed the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, to present the cost implication for a new minimum wage within 2 days. President Tinubu gave the order at a meeting with the government negotiation team led by Secretary to the Government of the Federation, George Akome, at the presidential villa in Abuja, the nation's capital. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, disclosed this in an interview with correspondents after the closed-door meeting on Tuesday. The senator representing Bauchi North Senatorial District, Senator Abdul Ningi, on Tuesday returned to plenary sessions following a 3-month suspension. The Senate had pardoned and recalled him, ending the suspension that began on March 12, 2024. Last week, the Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Abba Moro, moved the motion for Ningi's recall, expressing regrets on his behalf and taking responsibility for his actions. The Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, subsequently announced Ningi's unconditional recall after pleas from some lawmakers. Ningi's suspension stemmed from a controversial interview where he alleged discrepancies in the 2024 budget, claiming the National Assembly approved 25 trillion naira, while the presidency implemented 28.7 trillion naira. And now to electoral matters. Nigeria's electoral umpire has extended the ongoing continuous voter registration in Edo and Ondo State for 4 days. The Independent National Electoral Commission said the exercise, scheduled to end on Wednesday, has been extended to Sunday, June 9th, 2024, to enable more eligible persons to register. In a statement on Tuesday, the National Commissioner and Chairman of the Information and Voter Education Committee, Sam Olumekun, said the Commission took the decision during a meeting on Tuesday in Abuja. He added that registration hours have been extended from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily, and the number of registration centers have been increased to include all 36 local government offices in the 2 states, in addition to the existing 397 wards and the state offices in Benin City and Akure. And that's all on Breakfast Headlines. It's back to Osauge and Olive.
All right. Thank you very much, Adebola. Interesting to see, of course, Senator Ningi being welcomed back, to the House. He was suspended for 3 months. But, of course, the allegations that he made have still not been addressed, unfortunately. The allegations that the budget was padded by the current National Assembly have still not been addressed. And this is one of the reasons that Nigerians, I don't know if the National Assembly or members of the executive or legislative even care, but these are some of the reasons why Nigerians do not trust these people. Yeah, so if these things aren't clear to them, that the trust deficit continues to widen between the people and the executive and the legislative arm of government, then I'm not sure what else we are doing here. The investigation, or rather the allegations, have still not been spoken about. No investigation has been made. Nothing has really been made clear as to what Senator Ningi said. But of course, he's back to the House and we're celebrating. Almost the same thing with former Super Cop Abba Kyari, who, of course, was, released a couple of days ago and, of course, taking picture with his family.
Well, we will say was released per se. I think, he's going to bury his mom, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, my point is made about Senator Ningi and the House.
And I share your sentiments. Rather than just doing the grand, he was suspended and he was brought back, Nigerians need to know, want to have the details. Was there an investigation conducted? Was there an element of truth to what he was saying? Not just the whole, it's a lie. What thorough investigation was conducted as a result of that?
I agree with both of you. Following the charges against him regarding a budget padding or not, one would expect that him being recalled now to the Senate, it was learned that some of his fellow, lawmakers pleaded on his behalf.
Well, are they really pleading on his behalf? He's the one that, anyway, this is
what my point really is, like you said, we should have seen, a case whereby the Senate, hold a session saying He's been free of all allegations. He's not been found guilty. Hence, he can now, get back to the House. But hey,
I mean,
we're in
well,
Nigeria,
he
I
wasn't,
guess.
he wasn't
Exactly.
accused of anything.
He was the one accusing them.
the House
Yes.
of
Yes.
padding the budget.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That if that allegation has been found to be untrue, I mean, we demand an explanation as to why he's now being, for whatever has transpired, okay, what he has said, is it true? Is it untrue? Hence why he's now back in the House. Whichever case, whichever way the pendulum swings is my point. We deserve an explanation, before him be recalled.
I mean, let's hope that this is something that will be brought up again. I'm sure that my fear, my worry is that the other senators or lawmakers who have a clean record and probably want to call out bad behavior would then not see the need to call it out, because they will call it out and what they'll get in return will be suspension. I just worry that we're setting a precedent that will not look good for us. But we'll talk about this much later. Bola, thank you for bringing us Breakfast Headlines. See you at 9.
You're welcome.
All right. Still on Breakfast Central, we have more conversations this morning. We'll go on a break, and when we come back, we'll delve into our topics for today. Welcome back to Breakfast Central. President Bola Tinubu has commissioned the arterial road N20 in the nation's capital, Abuja, and approved its naming after Nigeria's Nobel laureate, Wale Edun. The road, among others, is the 5th infrastructural project commissioned in the last 1 week as part of the first year anniversary of the current administration. Our correspondent, Idong Joseph, files in this report.
The arterial road N20 stretches from the Shehu Musaya Adwa Expressway to the Outer Northern Expressway of the Murtala Mohammed Expressway. As the project was being commissioned by President Bola Tinubu following its completion, the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory appealed to the President to consider renaming it after Nigeria's Nobel laureate, Wale Edun.
A dead man does not know what happens. So I will appeal to you that let us recognize one of our own to name this road after him, who has done well, the only Nobel laureate we have that has made Nigeria proud in the world. I recommend that this road should be named Wale Edun Way.
The recommendation was approved.
Your momentous and recommendation to name this road as Wale Edun Way is well received.
The President described the project as part of government's efforts to invest in critical infrastructure of the Federal Capital Territory, considering its increasing population.
The population of Nigeria is growing. The population of Abuja Capital Territory is growing. It is necessary to invest in infrastructure to sustain the growth.
The decision to accept the recommendation, according to the President, is due to the contributions of Soyinka to Nigerian and African literature in general. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
And of course, to give the federal government more time to commit to a specific and reasonable national minimum wage, the Nigerian Labour Congress and, of course, Trade Union Congress, TUC, have decided to halt their nationwide strike. Following a Tuesday emergency meeting of the National Executive Council, the two Labour centres decided after the federal government agreed to increase the 60,000 naira minimum wage proposal. The National Labour Congress NLC announced in a communique signed by the presidents, Comrade Joe Ajaero and Comrade Festus Osifo, that it has halted the statewide strike to establish the proper environment for negotiations to proceed without interference. The organized labor has also vowed to reject any little addition to the 60,000 naira offer by the tripartite committee on the new minimum wage. Now, this morning, we're joined by our correspondent, Emmanuel Bagudu, who has been following this story quite closely. He'll be joining us now to talk about it. Good morning, Emmanuel. All right, we're going to connect with Emmanuel, and he'll be joining us shortly to give us an update on the story so far. But Osauge, they vowed not to collect anything
any little addition more than 60,000 naira. One thing that comes to mind is the fact that some people have argued that the federal government hasn't. I mean, the move they're making now about saying give us 1 week, they should have done that much earlier. And if they had done that much earlier, organized labor wouldn't have gone on strike. Now, the reports have it that the meeting they had on Friday, they had said they were not going to add a pin to the 60,000, and that was the most that they could offer. Organized labor said, go back and speak to your bosses and come back with feedback for us. We'll wait here till midnight. On Saturday, nothing happened. And this is, I'm reporting what the trade union leader said. And on Sunday, they were then invited into a meeting with Akpabio, with Minister of Labor, Minister of Finance, and they had a conversation, and they couldn't reach any deadline. They were asking for 8 weeks, and they said, we can't give you 8 weeks. And it was after that they realized that there was no headway. They tried, and Akpabio and the team were insisting on 8 weeks to come up with a decent living wage or to come up with a plan. And organized labor refused. And that was why the strike happened on Monday. Now they've gone, they've seen the effect of the strike, and they've come back immediately to say, okay, give us 1 week. If they knew they could do this in 1 week, why did they even offer 8 weeks in the first place? Is that not calling the bluff of organized labor?
Yeah, I mean, but, there's also, the part where whatever it is that they were going to deliberate in 8 weeks would have been the same thing that they, have come with yesterday.
Yeah.
Giving these people 2 years, doesn't, give you any assurance that they're going to come up with any figures or come up with any deliberations that are better than what we're hearing today. You would expect that it is the National Assembly, the representatives of the people themselves, that would be able to fight this fight along with organized labor if necessary, to say that Nigerians deserve better. The people that we represent, back at, in our constituents deserve a better minimum wage, deserve a better, living wage. But, unfortunately, we're not seeing that. We saw, I saw a news report, about the Senate president offering 35,000 naira minimum wage. Such a paltry, embarrassing sum to the Nigerian worker. The conversation about 494 initially, I mean, everybody knew that was never going to work. That was not a realistic sum to be requested. I'm sure even the organized labor, when we requested 494,000, knew that was not going to work. But the federal government initially focused on that and tried to make that the bone of contention here. But that really wasn't it. They needed a figure that would work, and so 60,000 naira, which we are currently talking about, obviously is still not enough. If you ask the average Nigerian, it's still not enough, as a minimum wage for the average Nigerian. What is a figure that would be better? Can the Nigerian government afford it? What moves need to be made for the Nigerian government to be able to afford it? If they claim that they have, suspended subsidy payment, then the country should be saving more money, isn't it?
Right, it should.
I mean, it's common sense.
I mean, if you look at the journey as well through the negotiations, Labour has moved 2 steps. The government has moved about 4 steps. So on the part of Labour, they have moved from 615,000 naira to 497,000 naira to 494,000 naira. The government has moved from 30,000 to 48,000 naira, 48,000 to 54,000, 54,000 to 57,000, and 57,000 to 60,000. So we're hoping that in the next few days, in the next 48 hours, like the president has given the ultimatum, they'll come up with a plan and something actually decent to afford, for the average person to be able to afford a decent life. If we're being honest, I think that this is our reality for now. This is our new reality. I don't know that the time will come back when things will return to what it was 1 year ago.
That never happens.
So this is our new reality, and we all have to start adjusting.
That never happens.
Exactly. So,
and again, it is very, very insensitive of the current administration to act like they don't know that Nigerians need a better minimum wage. It is very, very insensitive. Seeing the change that has happened to Nigeria and their economy, to Nigerian citizens and their finances in the last 9 years, and we're talking about since 2014. The change, I spoke about this, I think it was on Monday, and I was asking, that with the way that Nigeria's economy has fallen in the last 9 years, one would start to think that it's intentional, because it would almost not make any sense that we have back-to-back bad policies by, our government, by our, economic advisors, by our ministers of finance, by our CBN governors, back-to-back, that have continued to put the economy in a bad place. And it has continued on this way for 9 good years. You would almost start to believe that it is intentional, because there's no way that you have people in office that continue to fail at their responsibility to stabilize the naira, fail at their responsibility to improve the Nigerian economy for 9 years. And there's not one president that says, okay, there's a problem here. People need to be fired. People need to be replaced. You know, we need to find a way around this. The Buhari administration really just sat back there and slept for 8 years, made no improvement whatsoever in Nigeria's economy, made no improvement whatsoever in the finances or the living standards of Nigerians, made no improvement whatsoever in the Human Development Index of the average Nigerian for 8 years. And right after that, putting Nigeria in, in a much worse situation that Nigerians had ever found themselves. We now have a new administration that came into office, suspended the petrol subsidy. I mean, people have argued that that wasn't even part of the plan for that inauguration speech. He probably just blotted it out, and that created a lot of chaos. Of course, with the CBN policy that followed right after, it has put Nigerians in a much worse place than they have ever
I don't know that
imagined.
we could have completely avoided the removal of fuel subsidy, because from the Buhari administration, there was already a plan.
There's a possibility of a supplementary budget if there needed to be. There was no plan for the removal of subsidy. There was no structured plan. I've said here, I never would use the Buhari administration as a standard for anything. Nobody should bring them up in any argument and say, okay, this is what they had initially planned to do. They didn't have a plan.
Because the Tinubu administration is a continuation of the Buhari administration.
Well, my point is, they are not the standard. Everybody who worked in that administration is not the standard with which we would have any argument concerning policies that would shape Nigeria's future. And so there could have been a supplementary budget. The Buhari administration, whenever they were thinking about the suspension of subsidy, could have made better plans as to how they would phase out subsidy, how they would manage the economy while subsidy is being phased out bit by bit. Whatever it is, that's what a sane thinking administration would do. But of course, the Tinubu administration came in, and if he blotted that out on inauguration day, there again is the possibility of a supplementary budget. Okay, we're not ready for it yet. Yes, we want to end subsidy. Yes, it is, taking too much from Nigeria's coffers. Yes, we're having to borrow money to pay subsidy. Yes, Nigeria is in too much debt. We agree with that. But take it in phases if you have to. Lay certain foundations that are necessary, if you have to get these things done in a certain time frame, in 1 year, in 2 years, or in 5 years, whatever it is. But they didn't do that. We are currently in arguably the worst economic situation that Nigeria has ever been in. And the reality of the average Nigerian, has changed. It almost, you can't even explain the difference between life 2 years ago and life today. If you tell anybody that this is the price of goods in the market, this is the price that Nigerians buy goods in the market 2 years ago, and this is where we're buying now, you would think that maybe there was an earthquake and, something happened to the country, but nothing like that. It is just leadership and their policies. So does the government not understand? And is it, acting, ignorant of the fact that Nigerians definitely need a better minimum wage, or at least a living wage, with which they can survive the current realities? While, of course, they're still being, tricky with whether they've truly ended subsidy or not.
And on that note, we will, of course, come back to continue this conversation. We'll go on the break. We'll have someone from the PRO from Labour. We do have details that we have. We also have Emmanuel Bagudu, who is our correspondent, and he's been following up with this story. He's on standby this morning. Good morning, Emmanuel. All right, we'll take Emmanuel shortly. But let's go on a very quick break. When we come back, we're looking more into the story, the details of the NLC and the federal government conversation. Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We're still looking at the organized labor strike that has been suspended temporarily. And we have joining us from the nation's capital, Emmanuel Bagudu, New Central's correspondent. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. What is the state of the situation in Abuja regarding the strike? It's been lifted, and we're starting to see that some parts are, normalcy is returning to some parts in Lagos. But what is the situation there in Abuja?
Yes, I'm standing right on the ever-busy Kubwa Express Road here in Abuja. Workers are already dropping out. This road used to be very, very busy, even though we're seeing it being scanty this morning, but we expect to see a lot of turnout by afternoon. Yes, the suspension of the strike, came in yesterday, and immediately the NLC announced the suspension of the strike. We saw a lot of vehicles moving around. We even see schools, because the WAEC The SSC is ongoing right now. We see a lot of teachers coming in, to join the supervisors, supervise the final year students at secondary school writing their final exams. So that's the situation right now. Abuja is already, getting busy as I speak.
Is there any word on, the organized labor and their decision to suspend the strike? Have you been able to speak with residents or maybe even members of the NLC as to whether they are happy with the decision so far, of course, decision that was taken by organized labor?
We spoke with a lot of NLC officials who are imposing or rather, supervising the strike. So we spoke to them and they said that as far as they're concerned, this is just a suspension, that they are just giving the federal government just a week to test their sincerity. So it's not like they're celebrating that the strike is over. They are just they're just trying to test the waters and test the federal government, as they said. So it's not like everyone is happy. Everyone has at the back of their mind that if by next week the federal government did not meet up with the demands of labor, another strike is likely to happen. And to make it, the solar celebration is just by the corner, 17th and 18th. We have Democracy Day next week, Wednesday, June 12th. So it brings a lot of feelings because the NLC saying that they are not, it's not that they have really stopped the strike. They're only suspending it for just a week. So you don't expect celebration at the moment because until all the demands are met and everyone is sure that there's not going to be any strike action, people will celebrate their Salah, democracy will be celebrated without any hitch.
Yeah. What about residents in the FCT? Have they also reacted to the situation so far? Emmanuel, can you hear us? Yeah, I'm asking, what about residents in the FCT? Have you also gotten to hear their reactions to the suspension so far?
Yes, we've spoken to a lot of residents of the FCT, just within us here at Guarimpa, just within the neighborhood. A lot of them are happy to go back to their work, most especially the ones that are surviving on daily income. Some of them are surviving on daily wage, the laborers, those in construction sites, because we know a lot of construction is happening here in Abuja. So a lot of them are happy, most especially the ones that are into direct labor. The civil servants, we have not spoken to any of them because most of them are shy of talking, of course. But quite those doing menial jobs are very happy to go back to their daily income. Yeah.
So from what you're saying, the strike was very much observed in the nation's capital. Emmanuel, did you hear what I asked? I said from what you're saying, you're suggesting or inferring that the strike was properly observed in Abuja as well, right? All right. Seems that we're struggling with the connection. Hopefully we can still speak with them. But I think we get the general picture of what it is like. Life is returning to normal in Abuja, but it's not yet to Uhuru. We have a few more days before organized labor decides what they're going to do, what the next steps are regarding this. We also know that as at yesterday, flights were grounded. People were not able to fly in different parts of the country, in Lagos and I believe in Abuja as well at the airports. But the reports come in that everything is returning to normal now and that flights have started again. So that's the update that we have from Abuja.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty much the same thing in other parts of the country. In Lagos here, electricity, was restored, late at night in parts of Lekki. I think, Ikeja and environs maybe got electricity a lot earlier. But of course, it's some sense of normalcy, back to, where we were before the strike action, and I also, did hear a lot of people who were complaining, initially, about the power failure and all of that, even a sigh of relief. But of course, if the strike has been called off, you might as well restore power, and of course, wait for what happens next. Joe Ajero and Felix Osifo both have a lot of, this weight on their shoulders to ensure that they do not fail the Nigerian, labor force. They do not fail the civil service, public, sector, and of course, even the private sector, at this time. What will the Nigerian government commit to? Is it going to be 100,000? It's going to be 120,000. It's going to be 90,000 maybe. All these questions, must be answered. And of course, Nigerians also ready to adjust to these new figures. Because if they make it 75,000, 80,000 naira, it means that even the private sector has to make those adjustments also and up the wages. So it will affect a lot of people. You know, there's many other aspects of this whole conversation that needs to come into play to ensure that, you know, it does not create a crisis after these figures are approved. I mean, they were countering 494,000, but the truth is, even at 100,000 naira, you know, it would create some level of crisis across the country, because adjustments need to be made, you know, on salaries across board. Everybody then needs to be earning according to what the minimum wage is, at least for those who can afford it. And those who can't afford it will maybe have to lay off staff or cut down their workforce, you know, to ensure that they stay afloat. So these are issues, and of course, you know, does this mean that people will then have to, the price of goods and services will have to increase so that, you know, employees can meet up with the salary demands and their wage bill every month? These are the things, you know, that need to be answered. How much, you know, better does Nigeria's economy generally need to improve? The ease of doing business, you know, electricity provision for businesses. I mean, if people had 24 hours electricity, it would reduce the strain on their finances to buy diesel and to buy petrol to run their businesses. They then have more money to, you know, channel towards paying salaries. These are things, I mean, I don't know any aspect of this conversation where the Nigerian government can say that we have made things better for you, the Nigerian worker, or for you, the Nigerian employer, for you, the Nigerian business owner.
Yeah.
Like, there's no part of this whole conversation where the current administration can say, okay, we have made things better, or these are things that we're working on that would ease the stress on the Nigerian worker, on the Nigerian employer, the Nigerian business owner. There's no part of the whole conversation. And if there is, then of course the government should say it. That's why they had their one-year inauguration where the president was meant to at least speak with Nigerians and say, okay, these are the things that we have achieved to ease the stress.
It was the ministers that were really the ones
Well,
who came
no
to
minister was
direct
convincing enough. That's the point that I'm making. No minister was convincing enough to any Nigerian who listened to all those speeches to, you know, to hear what they had to say, okay, we're actually moving in the right direction. And it's what I'm going to be bringing up on Which Way Nigeria today. Where are we going? Like, can the current administration tell Nigerians where we're going? It's easy to make speeches. It's easy to say that we're positioning the structure of the, you know, this and that and that. All those speeches are easy. Any script writer can give you that. But do Nigerians know where we're really going? And can the current administration tell us where we're going?
That's a valid question, but only the president can answer that. Speaking about the president, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has instructed the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, to determine the financial effects of a new national wage, minimum wage, and the order was given by President Tinubu on Tuesday, June 4th, at the State House Assembly during a meeting with the federal government's negotiating team. On Monday, the team met with organized labor, which resulted in the suspension of labor's debilitating countrywide industrial strike.
The president summoned a meeting of all those who negotiated on behalf of the federal government, led by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Budget Planning, the Minister of Information, Minister of Budget and National Plan, I mentioned that already, the Minister of Labor, and of course the NNPC Limited GMD. He gave 48 hours for the new figures to be ready for negotiation with the labor union. We, of course, you know, heard from the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, and this is what he had to say.
The president had just summoned a meeting of all those who negotiated on behalf of the federal government, led by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. The Minister of Finance was there, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, myself, the Minister of Labor, the Group Managing Director of the NNPC. We're all there to look at those issues, and then the president has directed the Minister of Finance to do the numbers and get back to him between today and tomorrow, so that we can have some figures ready for negotiation with labor. Let me say that Mr. President is determined to go with what the committee has said. He is also looking at the welfare of Nigerians. Like I've said earlier, government is not against, it's not an opponent of labor discussions, it's not an opponent of wage increase. But what is there is that government is always desirous of ensuring that there is a balance between what government pronouncement is and what the realities are on ground.
And of course, you know, there you have it. The Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, clarifying, you know, what the president, of course, you know, had said and the orders that he had given so far. Will 48 hours be enough to even come up with, you know, some figure or a new
plan.
You know, a plan, you know, to deliberate with labor? You know, if they can pull it off in 48 hours, you know, then it means that it's something that they could have done long ago before we even had to resort to a strike, because labor had given warnings.
Yeah,
They had, you know,
the strike didn't take them by surprise. They had been
Exactly.
having this conversation over and over again. The current minimum wage was set to have expired months ago, and they knew that this was coming. So yes, I completely agree with you that, I mean, if it's something that should have been, if there's something that they can do in 48 hours, then they should have done it much earlier.
The current minimum wage expired years ago.
Yeah.
You know, many years ago. You know, I mean, it's even shocking to hear that at some point minimum wage was 18,000 naira.
Oh, it was.
The current minimum wage expired many years ago. You know, at even before the point where a bag of rice became more expensive than, you know, minimum wage. So Nigerians have had to make do with what they have and what was, you know, given to them, you know, by the administration, you know, I mean, with the minimum wage that was approved. But it expired many years ago. And look at, you know, a great thing that we have this on screen now, the minimum wage of top oil-producing countries across the continent. And just take a look at this. Of course, this is converted to naira from their currencies.
Wow.
You know, Sudan, obviously, you know, with the crisis in Sudan, you know, it's not shocking to see 7,500 naira. But Nigeria is right next to Sudan. This is Nigeria that is not necessarily at any war or crisis or anything where we are. But, you know, Ghana, of course, is 38,000 naira. Angola, 58,000 naira. DR Congo, 94,000. Cameroon, 105,000. 150,000 in Chad. Bear in mind that, you know, of course, there's population, you know.
Because I wanted to say that I know that the numbers look large, but I know that that's not all the factor to consider, because
yeah,
some of
there's
these
many other
countries
factors.
are still predominantly poor countries.
Obviously, you know, and they would answer for themselves, you know, why they are still poor, you know, why they still look poor. But the point is, should Nigeria, which is one of the largest oil producers in the world, be having a conversation about 30,000 naira minimum wage for its citizens?
No.
Absolutely not. And in what ways have we tried, through successive governments, to address Nigeria's income and our earning power, our GDP? I mean, in what ways have we said to ourselves that, okay, we should earn more money as a nation? There's too many resources that Nigeria has that it should be able to earn money from and pay its citizens much better. Aside oil,
I think it's also a reminder
agriculture.
to us that, you know, whilst these are very valid, it's also a reminder to us that we need to be particular about the sort of people we elect to represent us. You can't have somebody in office saying that Nigeria's workers should be paid 35,000 naira. You know, it's very important that we're intentional about the people that represent us and that they have our best interest at heart. But we'll talk more about this. We'll go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversations this morning. Welcome back. Still talking about organized labor and their demands from the federal government. Of course, there was a strike on Monday, a strike that has been halted temporarily for the next 1 week until some form of a middle ground is resolved. The president has asked Wale Edun, the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, to come up with a plan in the next 48 hours. Can he achieve this in the next 48 hours? What does this mean and what will be the next steps? This morning, we're joined by NLC PRO, Lagos State Council. We have with us Ismail Ishola Adejumo. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on News Central this morning.
Yes, it's good to have you. The strike has been temporarily suspended for the next 1 week, pending the maybe middle ground that the government and organized labor will come to. And the president has ordered that this be resolved in the next 48 hours. A plan will come up. So I want you to tell us how, you know, how all of this comes to you, how labor is taking this new development.
Good morning, Nigerians. Good morning, the viewers at home. We are happy for the president to have taken that very bold step, you know, instructing the minister to come up with a template that will give the government a clear picture of what the wage bill will look like. And as we are expecting that, the labor leadership have already met yesterday and reviewed the initial proposal that was put forward, aside from the 60,000 that was initially put forward. And we look at it from both sides, and we are coming to a level that from today, counting 5 days, according to the commitment signed the MOU that from today, that will be within the next 5 days, the tripartite committee will be meeting to see and review the proposal from both sides and come up with an amicable resolution, which will be okay by all parties for implementation.
Well, when you say an amicable resolution, does Labour have a figure or a range in mind that, it believes that it will, accept from the federal government? Because now we are talking about above 60,000 naira according to the resolution. If the federal government proposes 65,000 naira, would Labour be willing to take that?
Definitely, we have our own framework. There is a threshold and there's a benchmark which we are looking at. And the government, as soon as the government is moving closer to that, the leadership will shift ground. And,
so can you give us an idea?
I can't state it here categorically. It is based on negotiation. When you are going to negotiation, you don't go with a fixed mind. You have to have a mind, an open mind to shift ground for a superior argument.
Yeah, but negotiations, work this way. I know that I want to buy a teacup for 5,000 naira, and if you say that, it's 10,000 naira, and of course if I offer 1,500 naira and we eventually meet in the middle, I know that, okay, 5,000 naira is a good enough place, for me. If you tell me that it is 9,500 naira, that's not what I want to buy that. So there should be a range.
Frankly speaking, from the labor circle, what we are looking at, anything below 3 digits is not sustainable for an average worker in Nigeria.
So 100,000.
We don't know whether it will be above 100 or we don't know, but it will be with the threshold of a 3 digits.
Okay. What would you say to those who have said that Labour has not been very realistic with its demands, starting from over 600,000, now at 494,000, stating that the current administration may not be able to afford it? That's not just to say that they would agree to this, but will they pay salary? What would you say to people who have this mindset?
It's quite wrong, because we in the public sector and the private, we know that the government have been very, very, this time around trying to, build up the economy by expanding the tax net. So many taxes now is coming, and what it means is that more revenue is coming to the government cover. So what is our own place as a worker? We are going to the same market. If legislators can be earning as fabulous as they are earning, the people in the executive, the judiciary, they all have their own cut from the national cake. We are the receiving end. Since the subsidy was pronounced removed, all the employer of labour in the private sector, they've all jacked up their services and price of commodity. Some companies who cannot cope have already, quit production. So we are the only one that are the receiving end. The only thing government gave us was the wage award to cushion the effect, because they knew quite all right that it's going to have a very adverse effect on transportation, on food commodities, on housing, on all facets that the workers will need to meet their obligation. So moving forward, the government should understand that there is need for workers to have a living wage. That is what the president promised us. And we are not reneging on that to pressing that, Mr. President, your promise, your word should be your bond. And I think in the line with that is why he instructed the minister yesterday that all this forth and back discussion should come to a concrete terms. Get us a template. What will be the wage bill, and what will be the sustainable rate for the government to, at least with the economy, because they say the economy now is very fragile and anything can happen. But we know that as the moment the subsidy removal has been removed, the revenue has been also been increased. So the tax net have expanded. So should be a corresponding pay to workers so that their purchasing power can be, sustained. Yeah. Because now people can go to the market and people cannot even buy a tuber of yam. You can see in the social media, are going for half. People cannot buy even a bag of rice as a family of 2 or 3. So how sustainable is that for us? And if it is sustainable for government to plug billions of naira into pilgrimage, into some other luxuries that are not, we know what should be the priority of government. The workforce is critical. We have demonstrated that we are the key player, we are stakeholders in Nigerian government project. The people who are manning the critical sectors, they are not robots. They too have obligations. They have to pay their rent, they have to pay for transportation, they have to pay for their children's school fees, and so many other things. So all this put together, we should not be sidelined. We demand for a decent, a reasonable wage. We are not saying that the proposed 494 is sacrosanct. We are ready to negotiate at a very reasonable level. And that's why the leadership is committed to dialogue from time to time. They have been meeting, and the meeting will continue in the next 1 week until we have an amicable resolution.
Two things. Does Labour truly believe subsidy has been removed? That's the first one. And then second, what would you say to the government if they say we truly cannot afford to give you, 100,000?
Thank you very much. Subsidy, we know the percentage, the inflation rate as before subsidy removal. It was 2 digits, but it's not at this level. The day subsidy was pronounced removed was the day we have the problem in this country. And the inflation, grown up astronomically to the extent that today is floating within 33-34%. Yes. Food inflation is about 44%. So how do you want people to sustain, to survive by not indulging the corruption that the government said they want to reduce in the public sector? Because if your take home cannot take you home, you have to look for shortcuts to survive. And that is why we want to engage the government to reason that whatever now you have said you want to increase the tax net to to build up the revenue of the nation so that we're able to provide more critical infrastructure. So government should look into the area of revamping the economy by trying to create industry that will generate more revenue and employment for the youth. If they can do this, it will reduce more pressure in the area of insecurity and so many other areas. If you look at the area of the refinery they have promised, I know as of today we have read in the news that the Port Harcourt refinery is approaching optimum production, that they are test running it. So at this stage, we should be able to at least, we're proud that, okay, out of the 4 nation refinery, we have 2 or 1 that is working optimally. That will also reduce the pressure on the importing and exporting of crude, which we believe will bring down the price of, because petrol price have a lot of effects on the service and price of commodity. People who are from the rural, who want to bring food to the urban, they are complaining of transportation. And that has been the major problem that we are facing.
So would you say that what would make sense right now would be that there are some other things that are adding to cushion the effect of inflation on the average worker? So in terms of maybe transportation, healthcare, are there other things that should be added or can be added to balance it up?
Yes, that is why one of our cardinal demand was the reversal of the hike in tariff of electricity.
Speaking about that, in the most recent conversation, we haven't really heard anything about the reversal in the hike in electricity. The document we saw did not contain any of those demands.
It contains the second demand, apart from the minimum wage. Before the agitation for the minimum wage, we staged a protest across the nation, across.
I think she's referring to the agreement that
was
the agreement. One of our demand, go and read, I can share with you. The demand there is still, we are still demanding for government to
can we show the agreement?
The agreement is so now government is very committed to implementing something above 60,000.
Yes.
They have also opened a window for continuous negotiation. I quite agree with that. In the next one, we want the negotiation to continue open. And they also pledge that there won't be any victimization.
Yeah, but nothing was mentioned about electricity.
Committed and joined this strike action.
My colleague's
my question is, there hasn't been any mention of anything about the return to tariff. If we can please put that on the screen again. If you see the agreements here, after the exhaustive deliberation and engagement.
Yes, I've seen it.
So the agreement is 1, President and Commander, can we please scroll up? Is committed to a national minimum wage that is higher than 60,000, that's 1. 2, tripartite committee will meet every day for the next 1 week.
Yes.
And then the third one, labor in defense to the high esteem of the president. There's really nothing. There's no workers.
This is a temporary agreement. It's like a ceasefire mechanism. When you're in a war front, there can be a kind of resolution.
So are you guaranteeing us
for negotiation to continue?
So are you guaranteeing us that when you meet again, that the
in our own demand that was released, our communique that was released after the NEC meeting yesterday, the demand for reversal of electricity tariff is still the number 2 or 3. Yeah, in our demand.
How well are we doing with that?
We are resolute. We are determined, because prior to this issue of minimum wage, we never experienced that the government will bring that astronomical increase in the tariff. What they used to be annual increment on tariff, a certain percentage that you will not even notice But now they just take it from 65 naira per kilowatt to almost 200 and something. It is unaffordable for an average family. Even the so-called regime of band A, band B, and C is absurd. How will you create inequality in the distribution of electricity?
So I want to ask,
according to the existing law of the country, there should be uniformity. There shouldn't be any discrepancy or discrimination as to who is to be supplied 4 hours, who is to be given 12 hours or 24 hours, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Can I please ask? I know that the negotiation has been moving with regards minimum wage. So from Labour's end, we've moved from over 600 to...
From 615 now, we moved to 494.
Yes.
From 494 now, there is a discussion which
Right.
we also, take us to...
And then the federal government too has been moving. But we haven't heard anything about that with regards to the electricity tariff. Is there going to be a negotiation regarding the electricity tariff, or is a flat out return to what it was, or we're not accepting?
Definitely the negotiation on that is alongside with this discussion.
Okay.
It's one of the demand put forward. I will share the communique with you. It's there in the public space. You understand? We are telling government, before this negotiation got to this stage, there is already, we don't even have the impression that government will jack up the tariff.
Yeah.
Which also creates extra burden.
All right.
Most people now are paying, having it difficult to pay their electricity
Does
bill.
the current Labour trust the Tinubu administration?
Yes, every government will have repose confidence in a government. Election is over. Nobody is talking politics now. We are talking about governance.
Yeah, I mean, but do you trust, because, I mean, Labour has had these back and forth, with previous administration.
Mr. President used to be one of our pro-ally. He's also an activist. He believes in the emancipation of the downtrodden. So, and that is why you can deduce from his pronouncement yesterday, instructing the minister and the coordinating minister of economy to come up with a template as soon as possible, because if this issue should drag for too long, it will put the economy in a very serious situation.
Would you say that, from what you've said now, would you say that the way that the president has governed, how he's led this country ever since he came into power with the policies that have been made, you did say that he believes in the emancipation of the downtrodden. Would you say that he's led in a way that shows that he believes in the emancipation of the downtrodden?
We believe in what the leader says, and we hold them by account for what they have said. He said, let Nigerians breathe.
And have Nigerians breathed?
And now we are almost getting to a point of suffocation. Most people are dying. And that's why we are holding him for his word. And Mr. President, you have to walk the talk. What you have promised Nigeria on the Renew Hope agenda is where we are heading to. And for any government, they have their own gestation period, which is nothing less than a year. A year is over, going to 2 years. We'll be able to do a kind of stock taking to review on the policies that have been introduced. The ones that are anti-people, we should reverse it. The ones that are progressive, let us continue with it. There should be a kind of evaluation. And at this critical juncture, the government is trying to review some of these policies vis-a-vis the impact on the masses.
All right, we have a couple of days. Next week, we hope that we have you back and see if, your 3 figures, like you've mentioned.
3 digits is a threshold.
Like you've mentioned,
I'm
is what
looking
the
at.
And I'm
NLC
hoping that
actually
you
agrees
achieve
on.
everything, because yes, number 2 on the Labour demand is the reversal to electricity to previous rates. So
Yes.
it would be great to have both happen at the same time and not
see.
one or the other.
We don't want to preempt the negotiation, because the negotiation table, I've told you, it must be a flexible ground where you have to shift for superior argument.
Yeah.
If there is any basis for us to shift ground that, okay, this tariff should go at this incremental level, not at the level it is now, the leadership will look at it, side by side with the facts put forward. They'll be able to make a decision.
We hope that we would have you back
and
next
it will
week.
be about what we are after for Nigerians, is to bring about greater happiness for the greater number. We don't want few people to be enjoying while the larger population will be suffering.
All right, so we hope, like I said, we hope that we'll have you back next week, after deliberations have been made and, of course, maybe agreements have been had, and we'll know what happens next. He is the NLC PRO for Lagos State, Ismail Ishola Adejimo. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me on News Central Breakfast Show.
All right.
My pleasure being here.
We've had a very interesting hour so far. Let's, of course, quickly share with you a quick recap of some of the things we've spoken about in the first half of Breakfast Central, and, of course, what's coming next. Welcome back, and now let's take you through the newspapers this morning, share with you the big stories making headlines across Nigeria. We have joining us Shason Okwade, who's a public affairs analyst. Good morning. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Yeah, I don't like such because, I mean, he's a celebrity analyst that we haven't seen for years. He's traveled abroad across the 7 oceans and 7 seas. I wanted to roll out red carpet. That's why I wanted to do your introduction.
He was negotiating on our behalf.
To let people know exactly that you've gone to negotiate on our behalf, on the behalf of the Nigerian people. You sat one-on-one with the president, you know.
In between Labour and the presidency.
Olive, this one you are putting me on the spot this morning with the red carpet and your red gown in sync.
All right.
Glad to be here this morning.
Thank you for joining us. Let's kick off with the Punch newspapers this morning. The big story there says, Labour considers 100,000 as Tinubu issues ultimatum. President orders minister to calculate cost. Labour gives a 1-week ultimatum. 1 killed, 50 miners trapped as the pit collapses in Niger State. Sad story there. Sell crude to Dangote refinery. Federal government directs IOCs. And also Naira may settle at 1,450 Naira to the dollar by December. Fit ratings are saying local government funds, reps back federal government suit against governors. Bottom of the screen, the police hunt for tenant as landlord dies during rent face-off. And CNG will reduce petrol imports by $4.4 billion, says the federal government. These are the stories we can take on the Punch.
All right, let's move down from the Punch to the Daily Independent newspaper. On the front page of the Daily Independent, Tinubu asked Edun to present new minimum wage figures in 48 hours and wants realistic, affordable, acceptable pay for workers. Budget padding allegation. Forget yesterday's event. It's time to move on. Ningi tells senators. Aluta continua, Victoria Asata. Okay, that was not part of the script. I just added that one. Tinubu names arterial road in FCT after Wale Edun. Insecurity, difficulty, terrain, impeding rescue of 30 trapped miners, according to Niger government. Jonathan says politicians won't approach court if judiciary is upright. Nigeria loses $100 million annually to fish export law. Trawler owners lament high price of diesel, say over 40 to 45% of vessels idle. Alleged plans to revoke licenses of 3 more banks falls, according to CBN. Of course, this is because of what happened to Heritage Bank, so everyone's just jumping on that. At the top of the paper, we have Nigerian ranks below Benin, Sierra Leone, others in Open Budget Survey Global Index. It's not surprising, is it? Senate to enact laws against National Grid Airport shutdown. I think we should start on that note. That's a very interesting note. The writer there says, accuses unionists of economic sabotage and disruption of Hajj flight. Are you seeing where their priorities are?
Yeah, well, not surprising with the reaction of the Senate. If you see some of the things that are speedy in receiving passage in the last, since we started this administration, it will marvel you what our priorities are. But be that it may, I'm against the action of NLC in the area of shutting down the national grid and the preference given to international airline as against the domestic. It seems we like just punishing ourselves. I'm sure you know that Monday and Tuesday, the international airports across the nation were still open, but the local flights, and you can imagine Monday morning when individual had strategic meetings. I know of someone who was to close the deal that particular day, and was at the airport for like 5:30 in the morning.
Where was he meant to close the deal?
Yeah, he was to do that meeting for...
Nowhere.
In Abuja.
But the people in Abuja will understand that there's strike, so they can close the deal the next day.
The guy to actually carry out that meeting flew out of the country the next day and won't be back in the next one. And
he'll be all right.
So you can imagine there are specific people that have their plans, and those things have to affect
But
them.
isn't that the point of a protest? And that's not me supporting NLC, but isn't that the point of a protest to be able to hit where it hurts to get their attention? Do you think that if they just went on, mind you, before now, everyone has said, what is the strength of an NLC strike? They have had other strikes that we haven't taken serious. This is the first time in a long while that we're taking the NLC serious. And the only reason we're taking them serious is because they hit where it hurts.
Yeah, well, you know, for me, I'm not in support of the action of NLC in the area of this minimum wage because we seems not to get our priority right. Increasing the minimum wage, we need not have any value. Thank God both of you travel out of this country regularly. And you can understand the fact that when you're in US, you will not hear of somebody taking a 3-bedroom apartment for $100,000. You hear about $1,500, $2,500. Why I'd say that in this part of the world, you want to hear of money, you hear about millions on millions. You know the implication, the economic implication of this increase in minimum wage on the organized private sector. By the time government fixed this whatever 60, 100 as reported in Punch. I'm sure you know the implication of it. Will your organization, organized private sector that are already bleeding, I'm sure you know that currently most organizations are retrenching as against recruiting, because you talk about the cost of energy, you talk about several things that is eating out on them, and the next thing they want to face is increasing the personnel cost from where it is. I feel those things that the organized labor should have concentrated more. Like I was at a particular station yesterday, but to say, okay, this 30,000, we're sticking to it, but we want a situation where we're given deadlines to government on how to see how we reduce the cost of energy in terms of petroleum, diesel, electricity, such a way that we can all afford it. Remember, when they increased minimum wage from 18 to 30,000, the purchasing power of an average Nigerian reduced. If you are moving it from 30 to 100,000 as they are proposing, what would be the equivalent of that value in dollars? But because we know that practically everything that we bring into this country is being imported. So I feel that people like me would have seen NLC engaging the government and saying that we are giving you ultimatum. You promised us that Port Harcourt refinery will come on stream. We discussed it on this platform in December. This is June. We are not hearing anything. What is happening to other 3 refineries? How much are you working in terms of security in such a way that the SMEs can do more businesses? Let me tell you one thing I've observed practically. Before now, we grew up to know that we have the poor, the middle class, and the elites.
We don't have that anymore now.
As we speak, we have the elites and no longer the poor, but we now have another English caveat to say vulnerable and most vulnerable. Is to tell you that the strength of the middle class is much, because they bridge the gap between the poor then and the elites. But as we speak, you've collapsed that area, that there are no businesses for the small medium enterprise. As we speak, if the minimum wage is signed to law, and you're saying that the benchmark is 60,000, you have only fought for 1.2 billion of the workers, and not all. I want to see what will become of an organization like this, an organization like myself, we cannot.
So you think, okay, we're going to have you respond to this. I just want you to keep this in mind. So you think that labor should instead be fighting for refineries, fighting for reduction?
We should fight for those things. Our education sector, I'm made proud to tell everyone that people like us attended public schools. Yeah. But also, you know that as we speak, no public school is functional. Exactly. Everybody pays through their nose.
Hold on, Mr. Kwande. Good morning, Mohammed.
All right. Please call back, Mohammed. We'd like to hear from you.
So everybody now pays through their nose to pay for skill phase. In fact, it raises your BP each time the school is winding up to start another session, because you'll be talking of millions and all those things. But people like us enjoyed free education.
Where do you want labor to start from?
Exactly. Because there are too many things at the same time.
It's a ton of things that the government has failed. To
when you say government failed, you know, most of the time I don't blame government 100%. Labor union are part of it, because they are part of the policy formulators. They work for the government.
No, please relax.
Majority
you mentioned refineries here.
Yeah.
You've mentioned schools.
Who are the people working in the refinery that we are paying turnaround maintenance without producing a liter?
That is not it. If you give people an opportunity to steal, they would steal. It's not so. You don't now blame them. It is you that open the doors for them to steal and be reckless with your finances. You've mentioned security here. You've mentioned education. You've mentioned refineries. Let's speak with Mohammed. Good morning, Mohammed.
Good morning. How are you today?
Very well. Welcome. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to make a contribution. I'm calling from Abuja.
All right, please go ahead. Thanks for calling.
My contribution is just one. The labor is not hitting at the point. Our problem is not the living wage. Our problem is the National Assembly. The National Assembly put together, you know how much they earn. Newspaper allowance only is about 100,000 in a month. Do they read newspaper? Do they read newspaper? Domestic allowance of all kinds, 30% of this, 40% of this basic salary. It doesn't work. Do we really need National Assembly?
So you're saying, I mean, from your perspective, it's the National Assembly that is draining Nigeria's finances.
Yes, of course. The kind of money they got in overhead is too much. Luxurious cars, what do they do with it?
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Mohammed. You know, it might just be one of the things, you know, that I even believe that National Assembly members should work with minimum wage. They should be earning minimum wage.
At the moment they decide,
Thanks a lot,
if
Mohammed.
that will never happen, but if that ever happens, that's when you will see that the number of people who are running for, gunning for those positions that are no longer interested in them.
The minimum wage won't affect them. You know, those that make the law would always look for a way to circumvent this and get things better.
Anyway, so let's get back to your point. You mentioned the failing of Nigeria's refineries. You mentioned security challenges that we have. You're talking about education and some of the things that you mentioned now, and you think it's labor that is the issue, or is one of the issues?
Labor is one of the... Why do I say this? When you say labor, these are workers engaged by the government to carry out an action. If you are not doing your bit as an employer of this organization, you can go ahead and blame the owner who has created the lacuna. Each one of us must be able to speak out. I've asked questions. Payments are made for turnaround maintenance year in, year out without producing a liter. Who are the people you feel comfortable collecting salary for not working?
But you can't blame.
So I feel like we're shifting the blame where the blame is meant to be, because now remove the presidency. The reason why the president has a cabinet is because he can't be everywhere at the same time. So let's talk about health, for example, where every day we're seeing doctors leaving the country because they're not paid adequately, because they have Saudi Arabia and all these other countries that are willing to pay them more than they could have ever imagined.
Yeah.
So how is labor to be blamed here when there's inadequate pay, when there are ministers?
There is a union that is responsible in managing the health workers. Consistently, how much do we hear their noise of some of the flaws that the minister who is supposed to supervise that ministry is actually not doing the right thing for everyone to hear.
So is it the minister or the organization you are blaming now?
No, what we're trying to say is... They are striking
every other day, you remember?
They are striking, drawing the attention of the government and the minister. Most of the time when we blame the government, I'm not on the side of the government today. The fact remains that we must be able to know that every one of us, because I speak from the perspective of a private person, an organization will continue to grow, not because the managing director knows so much, but because everyone in their different units is doing what it's supposed to do and is well coordinated at the top. If there is someone at the top not coordinating what it's supposed to do, consistently, when you make the noise, you will get the attention that is required.
In Nigeria, has that ever really proved successful?
Well, it is not, but that does not mean that we should not keep our mouth shut to say, because if that is the case, majority of us that comes create time to even analyze issue, we just be fed up. But the fact remains that continue to make the noise, let your voice be heard in every structure that you see yourself. Then we can see things just improve. Because I can tell you, the same way Mohammed said, these so-called leaders do not have the interest of the citizen at hand. Otherwise, so much misplacement of priority in things that they do, even when they give the promise and the commitment, how much of it do you get?
I don't want us to
put the lead on this. You've said labor needs to make noise. I keep making noise to demand a change.
No. But I think what he's saying is that the noise labor is making should be redirected towards demanding that the refineries are fixed.
Refineries are fixed. The education sector are actually working.
At the same time, before refineries are fixed and education, right now, imagine me as a regular Nigerian, which I am.
So
how much before labor will get a move to change things in the education sector, in healthcare, in...
Well, we have like 8 years, the last administration.
Mr. Akwande, sorry, let me just clarify something. If we have the government promised 2019, that we're going to, I think Port Harcourt refinery was going to be up and running. And so you go to the Tinubu administration now and say, our demand is that refineries are all working, by 2027, right? And in 2027, the refineries are still not working. What next?
You don't need to wait till 2027.
What do you, 2025?
There are timelines that you put to some of those things.
Yeah, but what happens at that time?
You don't need to get to 2027 before you should have.
So when you get to that timeline, what happens?
We can go ahead. That's why if after so much call, this kind of strike is coming out, we said, okay, we have it. That's why, because my own concern is agitating for minimum wage because we feel some people are spending frivolously will definitely impact so much on our economy. Can we fix certain things that can reduce the pressure on every one of us? Don't forget, as soon as we agree to any minimum wage, we are saying above 60,000. Practically everything. Look at one of the headlines that you are reading will go up.
Yeah.
Look at the headlines you're saying. House rent, landlord and tenant exchanging, blows, and it's leading to the other side. A lot of people are not finding, people cannot even afford to pay some of those rent. By the time you add those things up, an average woman on the street do not know that you are working for a private sector. All they know is that government, thank God, though, government has finally increased the wages of the workers. Then the next thing is to inject more into the cost of things because we don't even have price control mechanism. And that's what I'm saying, can we maintain this 30,000 and see how we can put more pressure in fixing the things that will contribute? How can we reduce the interest rate? The average businessman cannot even have access to loan to develop it. Every day they are moving out of the shore. What exactly is attracting that business owner to neighboring countries that we cannot do as a nation, even having the capacity?
So you would support a labor protest if it was a protest demanding a reduction in interest rate or demanding fixing Nigeria's refineries?
Perfectly, because that will go a long way.
Okay.
It will go a long way than this issue of minimum wage that will definitely impoverish the people the more. Because at the spike of things, everything goes up.
Let's move away from this conversation and talk about what would be an actual realistic figure. Daily Independent says Tinubu asked Edun to present new minimum wage figures in 48 hours, and Labour considers 100,000 as Tinubu issues an ultimatum. I know you are not in support of the strike, but this is where we are.
Yeah, whatever cost that they are putting, the only area we always speak to is that the organized private sector should brace up, and it's not just about them. Workers should brace up, because by the time you pegged that and you say the minimum wage is 100,000, what they are trying to tell you is that it's times 3 of what your salary should look like. I've seen different arguments saying this is not salary review, but we are saying minimum wage. If somebody currently, your cleaner in this place is earning 50,000, and because your organization is signing to the act to say this is the minimum wage, average private sector don't pay minimum wage, they pay more than whatever government is stating. Nobody is paying their cleaner 30,000 the way everybody is actually doing. Most pay 40, 50, 60, 70 because they want to give a better lot. So by the time you now pegged it at 100,000, you have your cleaner earning as much as 100, 120. So what becomes of you? Because somebody is arguing and saying, this is not salary review. We are only benchmarking to say this is the minimum wage. That means people who are earning 300,000 should earn more to be able to get. That's why we're saying the increase in minimum wage will not add any value to what we have now, but we should talk more.
Let's hear from Prince. Prince is calling from Lagos. Good morning, Prince. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead with your comments.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, News Central. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay. I actually want to agree with what he's saying, because the truth of the whole matter is this, is that no matter what happens, even if the government agrees to give 500,000 as minimum wage, understand something that the labor people need to understand is just only a few people, just a percentage of people that actually work with the government. Other people are driven by, in fact, the whole economy is driven by private sector. They pay you 500,000 and I sell Gary for a bag of rice for 80,000. I'm going to increase my bag of rice because I'm going to be like, wow, great. More money now is in circulation for the person that I'm even pitying and all. And I'll increase the amount of things. Same thing goes with other areas in the society. Other things. So personally, what I agree with is this: what the Labour should actually fight for is to make sure that they force the government hand to bring back that band A, band B, band Z, and whatever. Take it back to the amount it is before and fix up the refineries and all, so we can start producing oil in Nigeria. The CNG stuff and all those stuff, that's going to take some time. And it's actually expensive, really. It's expensive. I see it like a hula baloo stuff. How many people can actually afford that? For you to fix up a CNG in your car or bus or whatever. It's going to cost
no one is going to do that.
Is government willing to provide that money? What I would have loved government to say is that, okay, you know what, for all the cars, we are going to provide the money for it, and they start paying small. But there's nothing like that. So right now, looking at the whole thing right now, it doesn't really make any sense. Labor collects the money, every other thing is going to increase, and at the end of the day, the purchasing power or assuming labor pool is not going to be. I mean, it's not going to benefit anybody and all. So I believe that labor should do better than what they are doing right now. They should look at the critical issues that affect everybody. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, labor is sounding very selfish.
Well,
and it shouldn't be selfish. They should fight for the betterment of Nigerians. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, for calling. Yeah. There's obviously also representatives on different levels. There's the National Assembly, there's the State House of Assembly, there's governors. I mean, some of these things, are things that could easily be done on, on different levels of government. Not necessarily calling the NLC to fight, for, Nigerian workers all the time. The private sector also, needs, has to be represented, not necessarily by the NLC. So it's a mess, yeah, and that's what I have concluded this morning that it's a complete mess.
It is a saga, I must say, but irrespective of where we found ourselves today, certain things needs to be corrected. We will continue to reiterate. I can tell you, just yesterday, somebody was just telling me he needed to get a drug. And you can imagine a drug before now that cost about 1,300.
Yeah.
It's about 13,500.
Yeah.
Imagine where would that person get that kind of money to actually fix some of those things up. So for me, labor should look for way to concentrate more on the things that will impact. Let the businesses breathe, just like the president said.
We're completely out of time. Thanks a lot for joining us this morning and for, of course, extracting the stories with us. We will continue these conversations on Breakfast Central this morning, and thanks to our callers also. We, of course, will take a short break. When we come back, Breakfast Central continues. Welcome once again to Breakfast Central. Now, of course, in the middle of all the conversations concerning the minimum wage and, the issues with the NLC and the federal government, can anyone, help ask Mr. President to kindly share his vision or plan with Nigerians? Is there someone who maybe knows better what direction President Bola Tinubu plans taking our dear nation? Not long ago, of course, we crossed 1 year since the inauguration of his government, and it was the most gloomy couple of days for Nigerians, who were, a lot of them, waiting for some sort of national address by Mr. President to share the achievements of his government in the past year. Nigerians, of course, never got that address. There was no address by the president, and so we're here again, once again asking Mr. President that since his team weren't able to speak authoritatively on the achievements in the last 1 year, can we then ask for some clarity as to where Nigeria is going? If you remember sometime last year during the campaign when Mr. President was asked by an interviewer, this is one of the responses that we got.
I don't want to sit here and reveal all my strategy. I am the first speaker among the three of us running. So they will spy on me. So you will have a limited answer here today. Another day you can bring me back. But that's part of what I do.
And of course, since then, it has remained a secret. Many, well, maybe he only shared with his fans and supporters and people closest to him, such as movie producer Toyin Abraham, who, of course, met Mr. President and had this to say, just right after the swearing in. He said, for the first time, I met the incoming president of the federal government of Nigeria, and he shared some of his ideas, visions, and strategy to solve the challenges before us as a nation. Listening to him indeed renewed my hope and reaffirmed why he is my choice. And so, to Toyin Abraham and others who have had the privilege of meeting with our president and speaking with him, listening to his, wonderful vision or plan, can any of these people share with us? Because as it seems, we don't seem to have any direction as a country. The highlights of the last 1 year of this administration has been a very confusing removal of subsidy. Of course, confusing because many have said that we're still paying subsidy. And then aside that, the removal of electricity tariffs, dozens of businesses folding, and of course, multinational companies leaving Nigeria. Inflation as high as 33%, food inflation at 40%, the highly controversial Coastal Road project, and of course, a reversal to our former national anthem, and basically nothing else. Those are some of the things that have been the highlights of the last 1 year of the current administration. Mr. President announced after getting into office an economic team called the Comprehensive Economic Coordination and Planning System that was made up of people like Tony Elumelu, Aliko Dangote, the BUA founder Abdul Samad Rabiu, Ms. Amina Meina, Mr. Ajayi Kadir, Mrs. Funke Okpeke, and of course Dr. Doyin Salami, a couple of other people named on that list also. It also went on to say that the team is mandated to formulate and implement a consolidated emergency economic plan in furtherance of the president's collaborative approach towards achieving economic resilience and growth. Okay, so where is it? What's the plan? And again, where are we headed? Because the results so far have been very poor. There's no indices that shows progress. There's no aspect of government or development that shows that we are progressing. And the PTSD from the Buhari administration is still very strong in the minds of every Nigerian. If you remember the statistics that showed us, where we were as a country, Goodluck Jonathan, and where we eventually turned out to be in the Buhari administration. This is an administration that had wave after wave of bad economic policies that just sunk Nigeria's previously growing economy deep into the bottomless pit. So please, can someone ask Mr. President, what is his economic plan and where are we headed as a nation? Good morning, Nigerians.
The federal lawmaker representing Bauchi Central Senatorial District in the National Assembly, Senator Abdul Ningi, has resumed legislative duties in the upper chamber after 7 and 11-week suspension. Recall that Senator Ningi was suspended on March 12, 2024 for 3 months after he accused the leadership of the upper chamber of illegally inserting projects worth 3 trillion naira into the 2024 budget. At the time he made the allegation, Mr. Ningi was the chairman of the Northern Senators Forum, NSF, and he resigned from the position over the matter. The lawmaker was recalled on May 28 after the Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Abamoro, expressed regret on behalf of Senator Ningi and pledged to assume full responsibility for his actions, acknowledging the gravity of the suspension.
Ningi, who resumed plenary on Tuesday, thanked his colleagues, the government of Bauchi State, and Nigerians for their support during his suspension. Let's quickly have you watch Senator Ningi and what he had to say.
Just last Tuesday, the 1st of June, I was in faraway Istanbul, in Turkey, when I got a news alert that the Senate board's resolution called me to come back and continue the business of legislation.
Welcoming you back and taking a unanimous decision to call you back from Turkey. I believe that you have a lot to contribute to the 10th Senate. I believe you're a very resourceful senator. And like you said, let bygone be bygone. So you are welcome. We welcome you back with gratitude.
Let bygones be bygones. We'll take a short break and we'll continue right after this.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central. Now, just before we went on the break, we talked about Senator Ningi being returned to office after 75 days of suspension based on an allegation of budget padding that he flagged off. Now, what has become of the allegation, we don't really know, but he said that let bygones be bygones as he thanked his colleagues for welcoming him back into the hallowed chambers. Again, my worry and the worry of a number of people would be that if we keep handling issues like this with kid gloves, where someone who's a part of the House comes out to make a strong allegation of that nature, an allegation of budget padding to the tunes of millions of dollars. At the end of the day, we will then silence those who might want to ask in the future, who might want to speak up in the future potential whistleblowers, and then perpetrate a cycle of dishonesty in the House. But it is what it is. That's the update we have regarding that story, and congratulations to him, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm sure you're not the only one who's thinking the same, having these same thoughts, that there's still not been any investigation into his allegations. So are they then saying that Senator Ningi simply, had a
just
bad
said
dream
what he felt like
day?
saying? Was there
Exactly.
a budget padding or not?
Exactly. Did he have a bad dream? Did he have a nightmare? And come to work that day and decide to just accuse the Senate of budget padding, to the tune, I think it was about 3 trillion naira. There wasn't any investigation. The Senate president, of course, didn't order any investigation. The president himself didn't order any investigation. It's not the first time that we're hearing of budget padding. For a long time. I mean, for instance, let's even start with 1999. There's always been those claims that the budget is padded by members of the National Assembly. So will Nigerians love to have seen that there's an investigation? Yes. Did they expect that there will be an investigation? No. Is this business as usual for Nigeria's National Assembly and, of course, the affairs of the country? Yes, it is. Senator Ningi, of course, welcome back for 3 months. His senatorial district, Bauchi Central, didn't have representation in the Senate because of his accusation. So, I mean, there's really not much that can be said or done, after this. But it once again, and I did mention this earlier, that it once again continues to, to widen the trust deficit that exists between the Nigerian people and their National Assembly. And it once again, of course, puts more fire or more flame to, to the accusations that the National Assembly and members of who are meant to represent Nigerians are very, very dishonest people. But these are some of the conversations we're having this morning, along with, conversations concerning the national minimum wage and the clamor for, an increased minimum wage. And I do have, some level of agreement with Sheson Okwade, who said that he believes that Labour should not just be shouldn't be fighting for an increment in minimum wage. What it should be fighting for instead is a reduction in, the cost of living, generally.
So
but
I think that both can do exactly.
Yes,
you can do both at the same time.
Because my challenge really is who fights for the Nigerian people, who is going to convince the Tinubu administration, the Bola Tinubu administration, or any other administration, that they must do what is necessary to ensure that Nigeria fixes its crude oil refineries. Who's going to convince them and make sure that they set a time frame with which they rid the country of all its major security challenges that have, put, a hold on agricultural produce. Nigeria till now cannot boast of proper mechanized agriculture. A whole nation does not have, you cannot look at the Middle Belt region and say, okay, this level of mechanized agriculture is what's going on here as a result of federal government's involvement and investment in agriculture. The Ministry of Agriculture cannot tell you, aside the fact that they give fertilizer and agricultural loans, that this is the level of investment that they've put into mechanized agriculture, so to enable Nigerians to be able to export agricultural produce. They can't tell you that because there's almost nothing of that sort. So there's too many, I apologize for that,
Mm-hmm.
there's too many things that the Nigerian government has not had any interest in doing.
And just to say that I agree with what you've said and to reflect again or refer to something that Mr. Okwade had said, whilst I agree with him that there should be a push for increase in reduction in the cost of living, but I think we're also completely absolving the blame where the blame should be. You can't say that the Nigerian workers should demand more when the government itself has not set a system that can enable them to show up for more. I think that the Nigerian people are trying their best. I think that they're working really hard, but they haven't really been blessed with leaders that are passionate about the plight of the people, that feel the people's pain beyond mere rhetorics and coming to give fancy speeches, but indeed and in truth.
It is mostly because we run a very flawed system. We like to call it a democracy, but it's a very, very flawed system.
Well, June 12 is around the corner. Around the corner, we'll decide if we'll have a conversation about
we
what
do not have
democracy.
a system where members, for example, representing their constituents can be recalled from the National Assembly. It's never been done. If we had a system where Nigerians even trust the electoral process, even before you get to the idea of recalling anyone, You know, people knew that before they were voted, they had to go through a free and fair electoral process. Then maybe some of these things will be easier to, you know, it will be easier to put these people on their toes. But we don't have, you know, this kind of system. And so it's difficult to put, you know, checks and balances on these persons. But again, my question is, who fights for the Nigerian people? Is it the press? Is it Labour? Is it their representatives at the state or the Federal House of, you know, of Assembly? Who really, you know, would put the current administration in the stores and make sure that it does what it takes to reduce the cost of living? There doesn't seem to be anybody as it stands. Because even while Labour is fighting for you, the Nigerian people are fighting Labour.
All right. Thank you for joining us on today's show. We'll be back again. See you tomorrow. I am Olive MOD.
And I am Osaogi Ogbawa. See you tomorrow.